welcome back to the Range Minded Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Zimmerman, and thanks for being here. I'm a little down. I'm a little sad. It's SHOT Show week, and I really wanted to attend SHOT Show this year. It just is what it is. Next year, I am hoping to go, but it is fine. Whatever, it's all good. There's plenty of videos out there to see what's new, what's shot. What I really miss is just hanging out with new people and obviously collecting patches, because that's what I do. I'm a self-proclaimed patch whore, is what they say. Anyways, that's not what this episode's about. I don't want to talk about SHOT Show. I want to talk about something else that's a little bit more relevant. Something that's definitely relevant to our time right meow. Let's see. I want to talk about a few different things, and they may not make sense, but I'm going to tie them all together, hopefully tie them all together in the end, and you'll see why I want to share these things with you. First, I want to talk about the intent of the Second Amendment by the Founding Fathers. I know we've talked about this before. I know it probably hasn't even been that long ago since we talked about this, but recent arguments, I'm leaving that in. I don't care. Recent arguments and debates online with newly surfaced pictures of protesters walking around with guns and what have you have stirred up a lot of motion with the Second Amendment community. And I think we should talk about it. And I'm going to do my best to not reference my show notes because I know you guys don't really, I assume you guys don't like it when I just read the show notes verbatim. But there's some quotes we need to go through that are pertinent to this conversation. This is my last Bundaberg. I'm kind of disappointed with myself. I don't have any more to drink. It is the best ginger beer ever made. Also, along with the founders' intent of the Second Amendment, I want to talk about what would you call it? The protest inside the church in Minnesota. And I kind of want to tie it also with the church shooting that happened in January. Was it January? When was it? The church shooting in Michigan, in Grand Blanc, Michigan. In Michigan. And I want to just kind of talk a little bit about church security, personal security. I'm going to send you guys as well, too, after the show is over, of course. I want you guys to go over to Christian Warrior Training. Keith is he doesn't know me from Adam, but Keith is a great dude. He just won a Gundy, by the way. I watched the Gundys yesterday. I was going to record this show yesterday. It's the 20th of January. But the Gundys were yesterday, so I had to watch and kind of sulk in my own self-misery, and I didn't record a show. I wasn't actually disappointed. I just was curious to see who won podcast of the year, because it wasn't this guy. But something they do not have, by the way, is Unsubscribed Podcast that won. What they don't have, and it's a very elite and prestigious award, is the You Tried trophy. I know there's only one of these in existence because I made it. And it's, affectionately called the Undie. I'm going to set that right there so you guys can enjoy it too. All right, should we get to it? Enough mucking about. Let's actually talk about this. Okay, so the founders, when they wrote the Second Amendment, they did not write it in a vacuum. Like, it wasn't just something that they pulled out of their butts and decided, let's give the future Americans guns so they can have the largest collection of any standing military in the world, which is great, and we do, but that's not what it's about. What the purpose was, and we've talked about this before, I know this is very primary, basic stuff, but sometimes the basic primary answers are the answers. Okay, so when they wrote this Second Amendment, when they ratified the Constitution, when they went through the Bill of Rights and decided, yes, that's what we want, it wasn't just because it was a whim. They had experience with tyranny. They fought off the largest, most vicious military power and unkind leadership. Well, it was tyranny. They fought off the king, who was unkind to them, right? They understood the purpose and the need for each citizen to have a way to defend themselves, to bring food on the table, and to defend their country against all enemies, whether foreign or domestic. Now, one of the primary sources that they reference to, and one that you should reference to if you are a 2A friend, is Blackstone's commentaries. So, again, Mr. Blackstone was highly influential on what the founder, Sir William Blackstone. Now, he wrote the commentaries on law in 1760. Okay, so it was contemporary to the founders. Blackstone called the right to arms the, quote, fifth and last auxiliary right of subject, meaning a practical tool to protect the big three. And when we say the big three, it is personal security, liberty, and property, meaning that it was an individual's right to defend their stuff and their family and their country. He wrote, quote, the fifth and last auxiliary right of the subject is that having arms for their defense suitable for the condition and degree, and such are allowed by law. And then he also tied it to a natural right, a public allowance under due restrictions of the natural right of resistance and self-preservation, when the sanctions of society and laws are found insufficient, to restrain the violence of oppression. So the founders felt the same way. Now, this is English common law. This is coming from across the pond. Now, you can only imagine what the king had to feel about that, and I don't know. I don't think the king liked Mr. Blackstone, Sir William Blackstone. But what Blackstone was writing on and stating, and something that you need to understand and incorporate in your 2A life, is that it is a natural right given by the Creator in this case. He doesn't mention the Creator, but if you think of nature's laws, where does nature get its laws from? So wherever nature gets its laws, that is where self-preservation and the human's right to defend him or herself from anything and to protect their property. Blackstone understood this, and the founders experienced it. They lived it. And because of their lived, real experience, they knew and understood that future Americans could quite possibly have to do the same to preserve their liberties. And we have. We've used that Second Amendment as a defense for many oppressors in many different ways over the centuries. Now, Blackstone saw the arms as a defensive tool. Okay, a defensive tool for self-preservation. Say that 3 times at night. You don't, because people look at you weird. Resisting laws when they fail. Okay, tyrannical laws, specifically tyrannical laws. But it's not an unlimited. You just can't use your arms for anything that you want to because you feel like it. That was not the purpose. The purpose was for defense against tyranny. Okay? Is this starting to gel in your brain? It wasn't meant to be used as a tool to abuse or to offend or to intimidate. That's not what Blackstone felt the purpose of arms were, because that makes you no better than the tyrannical the tyrant that you're fighting. Man, I am struggling tonight, but I'm not going to do many edits again. Now, let's just fast forward a little bit to Mr. George Washington. I think you guys probably know Mr. George Washington, I would assume. This is what he said, quote, "A free people ought not only be armed, but disciplined, to render them independent on others for essential practical." Boy, that's particularly for military and supplies. So, a free people, not a militia, not the military, a free people should have the right and the ability to have their arms, to be trained, and to be called upon when necessary. Now, this is he said it shouldn't depend on others. It is the right of the people, right? Our individual purpose is to be ready and to be armed. Thomas Jefferson famously warned against disarming the innocent folks when he said, quote, "The laws that forbid the carrying of arms disarm only those who are neither inclined nor determined to commit crimes. Such laws make things worse for the assaulted and better for the assailants." Wow. Are we seeing that today, perhaps? When you disarm law-abiding citizens who weren't going to break those laws that you were so concerned about before, but when you take their ability to defend themselves away, criminals love it. It's weird. How did these uneducated slave owners foresee such an important thing here? That's crazy, right? Let's see. He also said, he wrote this to his nephew. He said, "Let your gun, therefore, be your constant companion of your walks." So you guys should use that in your daily conversation. Meaning everyday carry. Jefferson understood and endorsed and declared the importance of everyday carry. What an independent thinker he was. Let's see. Let's jump down here. James Madison. He kind of important guy when it comes to the Second Amendment. "The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." Sound familiar? It should. A well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people trained to arms is the best and most natural defense of a free country. Shall I say that again? A well-regulated militia comprised of the body of the people trained to arms is the best and most natural defense of a free country. Now, we've talked about militia, what the term is. That is not the military, because at this time, the United States had no military. Every able-bodied man, 18 or older, was required to be part of the militia. Now, the United States at that time was not supplying arms to these individuals. It was their responsibility to have their own firearms, their own swords or knives, their own powder. It was required of them to have that stuff and to train with it. Now, they couldn't train with it if it was locked up in some armory somewhere, though many times they did keep provisions in these armories. Look at Lexington and Concord. That's kind of the purpose there. But the people needed the arms. Again, refer to Jefferson and Washington's quotes from earlier. Okay, Patrick Henry, quote, the great object is that every man be armed. The right of self-defense is the first law of nature," unquote. Again, citing nature's laws, not a grant or a guarantee from the government, but something that was given by a far superior being, if you will, from Providence itself. It is a man's right to be armed. Okay? Whew. This is some good stuff. In Federalist 46, by the way, read the Federalist Papers. Listen to them. I'm not editing any of these flubs out. You're going to get what you get. Just so you know that I'm human too, and I make mistakes. 46, Federalist Paper 46. He also said that, quote, bear against the enterprise of ambition. referring to government overreach. Patrick Henry. Oh, whoops, that was back there. I read the wrong quote. Let's see. Let's jump down here. Robert E. Lee. To preserve liberty, quote, to preserve liberty is essential to the whole body of the people. Always possess arms and be taught alike how to use them. Let me read that again. Again, this is Richard Henry Lee. Did I say Robert E. Lee? Richard Henry Lee. Little bit different time frame. Quote, to preserve liberty, it is essential that the whole body of the people always possess arms and be taught alike how to use them. Regulated would be what comes to mind there. Now, all the founders understood the importance of the militia. We go through that. We could talk about the Militia Act. We've talked about that before. I don't want to revisit that. Do your homework there. Do some research. Look at the Militia Acts. Look at what Thomas Jefferson had to say about the militia. Understand the purpose and the reasoning behind them. It will fortify your understanding of the Second Amendment. All right. Let's talk about limits. They talked about the importance of having arms, but did the founders have some sort of limitation on arms as well? Do they restrict any kind of possession or use or manifestation of these arms? Let's talk about that because we need to. Okay, so hold on. Let's try that again. Boston Massacre happens, right? We don't know who fired the first shot. It was a mess. We had these people in Boston that were protesting, and then you had the British. Somebody fired a shot. We don't know who fired that shot. Heard around the world, but it was a powder keg, right? Pun intended. And it was a mess. So John Adams, in the trial of the Boston Massacre, he said this: arms were for the defense. Arms are for defense, not offense. Yet, when we look at the Militia Act, it says you have the right to keep and bear arms for offensive and defensive purposes. So why is John Adams seemingly contradicting what the Militia Act stated about the right to keep arms for offense and defense? Right? That's what it says in the Militia Act. What my understanding here would be is, what he is saying is, you have the right to keep these arms on you, but you do not have the right to restrict other people's freedoms by using arms to assault somebody, to intimidate somebody, to force somebody to do something. Okay? That's offensive. Samuel Adams said the right applies to peaceable citizens keeping arms, not troublemakers. Okay? Again, we don't just assume that the Second Amendment is this blanket open statement like the left constantly wants to say it is, that we use it as a crutch just to do anything we want. That's not how Second Amendment fundamentalists, or whatever you want to call us, that's not how we view the Second Amendment. We understand that we're not going to go out and use a gun to brandish, to steal, to beat somebody up, to take what we want. That is not covered under the Second Amendment. That's breaking the law, right? We can't use, I'm not feeling too good tonight, so my head's stuffy, my stomach is churning, I don't know what's going on. But yeah, there's so much more to the Second Amendment than just having guns and walking around with them. That's not the purpose, okay? Thomas Paine, you should recognize that name. Arms discourage and keep the invader in awe and preserve order. Horrid mischief would ensue where the law-abiding deprive them of use. So what is he saying here? So people that are armed, I guess the easiest way to put it is an armed society is a peaceful society, right? And once you take those arms away from the law-abiding, mischief's going to happen, and the law-abiding will be in the minority and become victims. Okay. And a lot of the states' defense laws and stuff that happened thereafter talked about this, referenced this, saying that you can only use it for self-defense. You can't use it for threats. You can't use it for intimidation. Only lawful defensive purposes. That was the reason for the Second Amendment. That's key. Okay, so we just went through what the founders understood, where they got their framework for the Second Amendment, and the purpose of it. Again, they believed and exemplified the purpose of law-abiding citizens to be able to keep and bear arms for the purpose of defense, whether it be for their families, their property, their homes, or their country against tyranny. But the use of firearms to cause mischief or harm or to threaten somebody, no, that is not part of the Second Amendment. And you can't be a mischievous person when it comes to arms. That is uncouth, they might say, back in the day. Now, you already understand, like I talked about this in the intro, why I wanted to share this. Let's bring this to modern times. Minnesota is a absolute tinderbox right now. We talked about last week. We talked about the shooting of what's her face, Good. I truly believe that she was going to hit that officer. I believe the officer acted in self-defense, and maybe she didn't realize he was there. Maybe for some reason she didn't notice him there, but a reasonable person would believe, if they were in the place of that ICE officer, that she was trying to hit him. I believe his actions are justified. It's sad. It's awful. It is what it is. But I don't think he acted in malice or hate or anything like that. I just don't see that happening. But obviously, since then, people have gone nuts. Right, I think it's probably even more active than the George Floyd riots. The Summer of Peace and Love, where mostly peaceful riots were taking place. I guess we're not seeing cars burned and buildings burned down yet, but we're seeing a lot of disruptors to the point of people taking arms and walking in the streets because they believe, and I can see where they might get this idea, as sophomoric as they might be treating it, that tyranny is walking the streets, right? That they're viewing ICE as this Gestapo or the SS to President Trump, and just snatching people off the streets and loading them on trains. Right? It's ridiculous. I guess I can see where they're coming from, but it's still ridiculous. It's a false assumption. And what it's doing is it's being amplified by these agitators in the crowds who I think are being paid. I have no proof of this, but I think there's paid agitators that are stirring up the crowd and making far more of this than what it is. Being mischievous, right? As if we were going to jump back to a few minutes ago. Some of these are now including the new Black Panther Party. I guess new really isn't what it is, but they're definitely modernized from what they were. The original Black Panther Party, we got to do some water skiing on this. Back in the 60s, a lot of the gun laws that existed were blatantly, absolutely racist. In fact, I think all gun laws specifically hurt minorities more than any other person in the United States. You can try and prove me wrong, but they adversely affect minority communities more than the affluent, I guess you could say. So Black Panthers arise. They were keeping peace in California, right? That was the purpose. They were walking the streets trying to keep the cops in check. I don't know. I didn't live back then, but it sounded like the cops were a little bit rough with the blacks in California. So the Black Panthers showed up with arms. They were defiant from racist anti-gun laws, and they kept the peace on the streets. I don't know. I wasn't there, but I think the intent was a little bit different than it is now. I could be wrong, and please correct me, because I usually am wrong, but I don't mind hearing the truth. Now, fast forward to the modern Black Panther Party. To me, they're revolutionaries. They sound like people that are more in tune with Mao or Che Guevara than the founders. They're not about restoring the republic and individual freedom. They're about causing trouble. That's what I perceive them to be. And we're seeing these images popping out in the news, and it's really hard not to mock them, because you got that one gal with her left hand up, her right hand on her AR, which is just a Smith & Wesson M&P 22 with an empty magazine, which is going to do no good. Also, she's got the rear sight folded down, which is completely pointless. She'll die in a firefight, for one thing, which I hope it does not come to. Obviously, I don't want the violence on the street. That would be extraordinarily hideous and terrible. But then we see, and there's videos rolling out with, it's the Black Panthers, and I'm pretty sure it's a modern video. It could be the not effing around club or whatever. What were they called? You know who I'm talking about. Maybe you don't. A few years ago during the George Floyd riots, it was the NFAC, right? Complete clowns. But they're exercising their Second Amendment rights, sure. But if you're getting to the point that you're pushing back on the liberties of other people, I have issues there. Anyway, there's videos and pictures of other members of what I assume are the Black Panthers walking down the streets, armed. Some of them with the completely janky rifles, airsoft scopes, really cheap rifles, unloaded magazines. It's pretty entertaining in some aspect and troubling in another. But something we need to recognize. Also, we're seeing pictures of other dudes walking around with AR-style rifles. There's that one with a guy sitting, and I've heard this picture's AI. I've heard it's from 2018. Either way, he's sitting on the car, like a trunk of this car, with a little, it's an MP 22, but it's a pistol, unloaded magazine, finger on the trigger, pointing, flagging his buddy, whatever. And then you see another picture of a rather healthy man standing on the corner. Kind of reminds me of Cartman, I guess, off of South Park, but he's got a pretty nice setup with his AR pistol and a suppressor, claiming that he's just keeping the streets safe. Again, he's probably got the only magazine is probably what's in the gun. Whatever, training is probably not a huge priority to them. Now, what we just talked about from the founders and what we just talked about now, does, in your opinion, and I'll share you mine, does your opinion reflect that these folks are simply displaying and exercising their Second Amendment rights by walking the streets with these rifles slung over their shoulders? Yes or no? Now, again, the founders, the intent of the Second Amendment was to fight against a tyrannical government, number one, and to provide food and provisions for your family, things you can sell, whatever, would be a secondary, secondary thing after self-preservation, meaning self-defense for property and family, right? How is this group of folks aligned with what the founders' intent of the Second Amendment was? Are they causing mischief? In some cases, no. Are they using it to intimidate? I think so very much, yes. At what point does your Second Amendment right go from defensive to offensive? That sounded very British. At what point does it become offensive? You guys, you need to answer this for yourself. I feel like it really is teetering on both sides, because I'm an absolutist, right? I believe that the Second Amendment is for everyone in the United States. It's all citizens, abiding that they're not a prohibited person. We don't know how many of these individuals, like we talked about last week, could be prohibited persons. And I still am concerned that their sudden flamboyant love for the Second Amendment could actually wound the purpose of what it's for later on down the road, particularly if things turn extremely violent. That would not be good. That would not be good. I think that's a very real threat. I hope I'm wrong there, but I think that's a possibility that once things get to the point of violence, the government might step in and happily remove your Second Amendment rights or extremely restrict your abilities and your liberties, I guess I should say. So you decide. You tell me. Put it down in the comments. What do you think? Do you think these protesters, these anti-ICE protesters, are exercising their Second Amendment, or are they to the point of causing mischief, intimidation, and harming the rights of other people? You tell me. You tell me what you think. This is an important conversation to have. It's already been had on X. This isn't my idea for this show, but I wanted to dive into a little bit deeper. It's important for us to decide, okay? And the reason why, here's why I feel it's important. I guess I shouldn't just say, well, you got to figure out why. This is why I think it's important, okay? Things are going to get muddy. Things are going to get confusing. Things are going to not be what they appear to be. We can no longer be fence sitters in this country. We have to decide, are we for liberty, individual rights, and the republic? Or are we for big daddy government granting us rights? Because those are not the same thing. I've said this before and I'll say it again. The Constitution does not grant you rights. That is not what the Constitution is. The Constitution does not say Steve gets guns because they're fun. No, what the Constitution says is, starting with, on the Bill of Rights, let's put it that way, the government has no ability to take these things away from citizens. They come from a source far greater than any man. Do not touch them. That's what the Bill of Rights is. The Constitution says, hey, dummies, you're elected by the body of the people. Right? There are to be free and fair elections. The people decide who their representation is, and you work for them. You are to be held accountable to the citizens. Yet here we are. We've given that accountability up and let them just have free reign. And this is what we have gotten. We deserve everything that we have right now because we have been lazy and apathetic citizens, me included. Anyway, that's my rant on that. Let's jump to the next thing. Hold on. I have got to scroll down my show notes. I'll be right back. All right, let's jump to two. To you is just seconds. To me, it was a few minutes. I had to take care of some things. Shall we? All right. Let's jump to the next section of what I wanted to talk about. I'm going to do my best to share what I know. Some of this stuff will probably be inaccurate because that's just what happens sometimes. So January 18th, just this past Sunday, in St. Paul, Minnesota, there was a bunch of people, anti-ICE protesters, burst into this church. It was called City's Church. I think it was an evangelical church. That doesn't matter either way. Like I said, about 30, 40 anti-ICE protesters burst in through the doors and disrupted the service. They were extremely belligerent. They were rude. There's several videos from different folks in there in the crowd, intimidating and harassing the parishioners in the church. It was a debacle. Also, Don Lemon was involved, allegedly. It was ridiculous, right? It's just an absolute mess, mayhem, and just freaking retarded. All right, it was so stupid. Now, the anti-ICE protesters chose this church because one of the pastors is the director for the St. Paul field office, from what I understand, of ICE. And so somehow they found out that information. By the way, there was a civil rights attorney there in the crowd, not in the church parishioners, no, in the disruptors of the church service. They went in there with bullhorns. They were chanting things. Like I said, they harassed all the congregants. They made their way to the pulpit. They were just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Again, like I said, it sounds like the pastor was one of the field guys, field office director guys. I don't know what the hell they're called, for that local ICE office. Doesn't sound like he was the preacher per se that day, but he was at least in the congregation. And again, Don Lemon showed up and interviewed this guy, talking about, hey, it's our First Amendment right to protest in your church, which we'll talk about that. Just citing the First Amendment for the right to protest and their right to assemble, neglecting the First Amendment rights of these people to peacefully assemble and worship how they may on private property. Again, your freedom of speech does not jump onto private property as well. That doesn't really always work that way. It didn't turn violent, as far as I know. Not like the church shooting in Grand Blanc, or Blanc, whatever. But nonetheless, it was extremely disruptive. There was kids in there. You can see some of these pictures floating around on Twitter where these kids are freaked out. Obviously, they're going to be traumatized. It's an absolute mess. Now, for what it sounds like, there are some federal charges pending on these protesters because they did commit a crime. There are federal statutes out there that make what they did a federal crime. So if they catch up to all these individuals, it's probably not going to be good for them. Pam Bondi said that she's going to do, they're going to execute the law to the fullest. Harmeet Dillon said the same thing. I just read earlier that the church is looking at legal actions against these individuals. So it could get interesting. I hope. Now, I don't want violence. We had a big debate earlier today on X. Once in a while we'll jump into some lives with a few people. I don't want violence for these people. Man, we should be praying for these individuals that are clearly have lost their mind. We should be praying for them. If you're the praying type. But it's gone off the rails, right? That's not a protest. When you can peacefully assemble all you want, absolutely, that is a covered protest. But when you I wouldn't say they broke in, because I'm assuming the doors were unlocked. But when you enter a house of worship and disrupt a service, come on, that is not playing good for your cause. That's ridiculous. Either way, like there's harassment. There's probably some trauma for these younger kids. Just ridiculousness, right? Absolute ridiculousness. Definitely pre-planned. Like, it wasn't just on the whim of things. And Don Lemon's claiming that, I didn't know what was going on, even though he was hanging out with the protesters in the parking lot for like an hour before, and he documented everything. So you can't go back and say you didn't know. You filmed the whole process, you moron. So there's that. Now, this brings to light a couple of issues, and we've kind of touched on this stuff, I think, before, maybe not on this show. Well, actually, let me get to the next one, and then we'll correlate all what we talked about in this episode all together. So, Grand Blanc, right? That was obviously terrible, right? So, I talked about before, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS, Mormon, whatever you want to call me. It doesn't matter. At least it wasn't like that, where shots were fired, where the church wasn't set on fire and parishioners were trapped inside. Thank goodness it didn't turn to that. But it starts to, this is what made me want to talk about this tonight. It starts to come down to your personal security, your situational awareness, and your action plan for starting with you, and then your family, and your home, and your community, and sometimes maybe in that, between that community and that home little security plan, where you worship. Right, we should think about our security protocols in first of all layers of influence, but also in layers of penetration. I don't know. That sounds really bad. We need to have layers of security in lots of different ways. We need to think about how we're going to keep ourselves safe and our loved ones safe, no matter where we go. Now, that a huge key of that obviously is situational awareness. Again, when we go back to St. Paul, I don't know how they got into the church. I don't know if the doors were locked or unlocked. I don't know if somebody let them in. But, and I'm kind of relying on Keith from Christian Warrior Training. By the way, he just won a Gundy for, which is awesome. Keith's a great guy. He doesn't know me. I think I already talked about that, but I support him 110%. And he talked about this in one of his videos. How maybe if they had a security detail, the people outside could have warned the people inside. They could have locked the doors, and they could have avoided this situation altogether. Now, how does that apply to you and your home and your family? How does that apply to where you worship? This is a big deal. Like, this should be a wake-up call to anyone that's concerned about their personal safety and the safety of their family. What are your protocols? What are you doing to identify a threat in enough time to where it's not a threat? Does that make sense? Like, time saves lives. If we can identify the threat from a long ways away, we can make the necessary moves for us to get out of harm's way. Now, obviously, St. Paul, that church, they had no protocols. Or if they did, they failed. Obviously, in Grand Blanc, whatever the hell it's called, I think it's Grand Blanc, right? No security whatsoever. And that's highly unfortunate. Now, we could go and say, oh, these churches did this wrong. They did that wrong. They're terrible at doing this. They're terrible at doing that. Or we can say, do I do that stuff? Are my doors unlocked? When I go to the office, are those doors unlocked? Do I know where the emergency exits are? At the grocery store? At the mall? At the restaurant I go to? We can Monday morning quarterback all we want, but it's not going to change the score of the past game, is it? But we can review the tapes for the next game and be ready. Little football analogy. What are you doing to keep yourself and your family safe? Here's a couple lists. Again, this really comes from Keith. I'm going to kind of steal his stuff. By the way, if you need to set up any kind of a church security team, go to his website, go to his YouTube channel. You don't need to tell him that I sent you. I don't want him to tell you that I sent you. I want you to make the effort to go over there, to subscribe to his channel, to follow his stuff, because it's solid. It's good stuff. It means nothing to me to get any kind of, ooh, Steve, he's super good. No, I don't care. I want you guys to be safe. That's what I want. So let's look at these layers of security. This is, like I say, this is kind of stealing. Okay, it's blatantly stealing Keith's stuff. So number one is we need to have some kind of a prevention perimeter. That's our very first layer, right? We need to have lights. We need to have cameras. We need to have a way to identify any kind of threats that are out there. If we're looking at church-wise, we need to have somebody outside looking around, identifying vehicles that look suspicious or we don't know, or identifying individuals that are acting kind of shady, kind of weird. But you also need to have communication between these people too. Like, you got to be able to communicate. If you have an outside guy, you need to talk to the inside guy. If you live at home, or if you are at home, you need to have cameras that you can reference. And you need to have locks and maybe alarm systems and such, okay? Again, the church in St. Paul, sounds like it was not locked, and I don't think there was people outside. Maybe there was. I don't know. And then you need to have, the next layer is have some greeters, right? And I don't mean like some of the kids in the congregation to say, hi, welcome. No, you need to have some dudes that, not cold and unfriendly people, but people that can identify a threat if they need to, but asking the right questions and getting to know, at least getting a feel for what these individuals are doing. If the St. Paul Church had some dudes outside, or gals, whatever, that had walkie-talkies, they probably could have told the people on the inside, hey, lock the door, something's not right. See what I'm saying? All right. You also, next layer is to have a detection layer, I guess, even though cameras might be a part of it. But with that detection, you need to develop your situational awareness skills. You need to look at pre-incident indicators. Look at people's behavior. Understand to say, hey, that's not right. If something doesn't feel right or something doesn't look right, it's probably not right. Okay? You need to understand that. And you need to be able, again, to vocalize that if you have a security team. Next, you need to have some kind of a delay layer. Locks on the doors, reinforced doors, something that makes it hard for somebody to get in. Maybe panic buttons or something else like that, something to notify the authorities, which really bleeds into the defense or response layer, where you're communicating with law enforcement. And not everybody in the congregation, maybe in the house it's a different story, like for your own personal home, but there has to be a way to communicate with the responding authorities about what's going on. Okay. If it's a deadly threat, obviously you need to have somebody that's able to make justified shots, prudent shot placement, not just everybody around, whether it be in the office or your home or at church. You don't want everybody just shooting. That's not wise. But you need to have a security team at your place of worship, or I don't know how you'd figure it out at the office. Honestly, I have no idea how that would work, but I'm sure there's ways. But in your home, you need to communicate what your emergency action plan is with your family, and who's going to respond in what way. It's kind of a big deal. And then you need to talk about recovery side of stuff, is like where your egress points are. If you're going to gather at a specific place, how everybody's going to get out of whatever building it is and know where to go. All these things have to be discussed and communicated with. And the more people you get involved in this security scenario, the more complicated it gets. It's very important that you start thinking about this stuff early. Do it yesterday, particularly for your home and for your family, right? And for yourselves. Like, you need to be developing these skills now. It's getting crazy. Now, the reason I talk about the St. Paul thing, the St. Paul Church thing, and then the protesters and the purpose of your Second Amendment, it all ties together, folks. It all is one big lump sum. The founders saw fit that you, the individual, the responsible person, has the right to keep and bear arms for your self-defense, for your defense of your property and your family, and defense of your country if necessary. You don't have the right to escalate the violence beyond the need. What do I mean by that? I mentioned we had a discussion on X today about the church thing on Sunday. One dude's like, man, I would just punch him in the face. I'd hit him with a baseball bat. If I had anything, I would just smack him in the face. The guy needs it. Okay. And then you're the aggressor. None of those people in the St. Paul church were violent. They were belligerent and rude, but they weren't violent. Now, if we escalate to the point of violence, then we're the aggressor. Then you're going to jail. Or worse. The founders didn't want us to be, I don't know, gunslingers, I guess. That's not the point. The point is to be responsible and to be gentlemanly and to use force only when necessary and only use the force necessary to stop the threat. Now, the founders don't say that, but I do. I'm not a founder. I'm the founder of the podcast, one of the original founders of the podcast anyways. So how about that? But we don't want to use, you can't escalate the force beyond what's needed. Yeah, you can shout at the guy or whatever that's being belligerent, but the minute you touch him, you're in jeopardy. Like, you just assaulted somebody. You put violence in the mix, yeah, that's a big issue. You're going to jail. You don't intimidate. You don't cause mischief. You need to be the better person. It sucks, but it's just the way it is. If somebody come into my church and was acting that way, would I want to punch the people in the face? Yeah, absolutely, I would want to. And it would be tough not to. But you got to be the better person. You got to. The Second Amendment is there to defend your rights and your freedom. Once it's used as mischief and as intimidation, it is no longer, it's not covered by the Second Amendment. I'm sorry. And fighting against ICE that are doing lawful, justified duties, call me a bootlicker, whatever, I don't care. They're following the law that is established. If you don't like the law, change the law. Hire somebody else that will be your representation and change the law that exists on the books. Trump is not doing anything tyrannical or way overboard of what it was expected by the founders. He is executing the law that is written and justified in the books that we have. If you don't like it, change it. By the way, I didn't see the lefties pissed off with Barack Obama. He deported way more people. I don't see any issues there. They weren't all upset when ICE was going through the streets picking up illegal aliens then. And they did. Yeah, they totally did. And if you don't want to get shot by ICE, don't be an idiot. Don't take your cars. Don't take your guns. Because you're not fighting against tyranny, you're going to lose in a gunfight. This wasn't going to happen. One magazine that's unloaded, yeah, that's not going to turn out too good for you. That is just intimidation. That's all that is. And it's not wise. The world we live in now is not the world that we grew up in. My kids are having a totally different experience in the United States than I did. And my experience was different than my dad's. And my mom's, I guess I can't include my mom. I say that because my dad's an immigrant who came here legally, who went through the arduous process to become a citizen. They didn't just hop the border. You see, my dad's family left war-torn Germany because they understood what fascism was. They understood what communism and socialism brings. It brings death. It brings poverty. They came to a place that offered freedom and success and failure, honestly. There's no guarantee of someone's success when they come to here. But they have the opportunity to try and fail. If they fail, whatever, they can try again. We have a country that is built with laws. Laws are there as a boundary, as a framework to keep society together. Once you start taking away basic laws, society fails. Once you say, well, anybody can come, you destroy the border, what do you think is going to happen? I don't know. Rome's probably a pretty good example. The country falls apart. It loses its identity. It loses the charm and luster and its purpose. The focus is gone. It is just land. I want an America that has pride and not the stupid rainbow flag either. I want America that cares about the freedom of individuals, that offers opportunity, that doesn't stifle it because somebody feels like it should. I don't care if these laws hurt your feelings. Change them. America is a land of opportunity, a land with a purpose. And when we take away that purpose, it is nothing. The founders fought against tyranny. Tyranny that's more than what you think you're experiencing right now. What you're asking for is something you are incapable of handling. Just because you have the hubris and the attitude of a petulant child doesn't mean you want what you're asking for. Because that's what petulant children do. They ask for something that they don't understand, and then they whine when they don't get it. You guys, you need to stay safe. I'm going to end this episode here. I don't know how long it's going to be. Probably too long. I love you guys. I appreciate everything about you guys. If you like today's show, please make sure you like, you subscribe, you share it with your friends, all that crap that they always ask you to do. I do this because I feel like I have a voice. Because I feel like I should be your voice. Some of you guys don't have the courage to say what I have to say. Some of you do. And you should share your voice. Don't be scared. I care about every one of you. I'm grateful for all of you that follow along, that listen to the show. A couple of ways you can support the show. Obviously, we talked about commenting and liking and sharing. Yeah, that is free. That costs you nothing. You can also buy a patch. Jump to the website, rangemindedpodcast.com. I have a few patches there. I come up with a couple more ideas. If you really want to help out the Range Minded Podcast, there's a couple other ways you can do that. I do have a Patreon subscription. It's $5 a month. People spend more than that on a cup of coffee, 1 cup of coffee. With that Patreon membership, I'll send you a Range Minded Podcast patch, the original podcast patch with the logo. But you can also jump in. I'm going to be presenting the Patreons with a couple of designs, and the Patreon subscribers get to help decide what the next patch will be, and then they get one of those patches as well, and that's what you get for $5 a month. I'm hoping to get some feedback on this next patch, but you don't get to decide what it is. You won't even get to see it if you're not a Patreon member. They're not exclusive, but they get the first dibs on what it is, and they get to decide what the patch looks like. I'm excited for these couple of ideas. So jump on Patreon if you want to do that. And honestly, there's other ways too long to mention. You can find my link tree on the website. That'll take you to some other options. You guys are fantastic. Stay safe out there. It's going to get worse before it gets worse. But I want you to do 3 things. Actually, 4 things. 4 things. Take somebody shooting. Can't miss out on that one. But I also need you to stay safe. Stay armed. Stay range-minded. Love you guys. Peace out. Go to bed. Or get off the toilet. Or, whatever you're doing. Pay attention to work. Whatever. Bye. Next gen warrior, steady and deadly. We
Enhance. Enhance. Enhance.
Just print the damn thing.